My name is Diego Castillo, and this is the story of how our band Sandwich was able to navigate this crazy pandemic, along with its never ending lockdowns, uncertainty, constant worries, and fears. And despite it all, not only being able to keep our collective sanity, but also somehow remaining true to our artistic side. We even picked up a few new skills in the process. The saying goes is that necessity is the mother of invention. I never thought that would be so true for all of us. We're a band that's been together for over 20 years and have been fortunate to have played constantly, whether shows in Manila, out of town, or even many stops internationally, performing well over 1,000 shows into our career. So when that all stopped, it felt like a piece of us had disappeared as well. The world went into a grinding halt, but we tried our best to adapt to the situation. We were one of the first bands to have been able to put on live shows, albeit not all together in the same place, but live nonetheless, studying and using all the new technology that was available to make it happen, reconnecting not only with our fans, but with each other as well. I'm sure that's something that everyone in the world knew was important during the early stages of the pandemic, but it didn't stop there. This is Mike. He plays drums for the band. Prior to the pandemic, Mike had absolutely zero knowledge in anything tech. He was the one member of the band who couldn't even send a file via his phone, much less navigate it. He didn't even have a computer to record home demos. But since the pandemic, not only does he have a computer and a new fancy phone, he was able to parlay our downtime to set up a new recording studio at his house and was able to launch a successful YouTube channel called Nagsimula sa Patikim-Tikim, which he shoots, edits, hosts, and even scores all on his own. A channel devoted to all of Mike's culinary adventures. Ika nga niya, kakaiba ito ah.
Okay, during the pandemic, I had to reinvent myself. Kailangan kong may gawin without my bandmates and to create something, yung urge ko to do something. Gumawa ako ng video, tinawag kong Nagsimula sa Patikim-Tikim. It's about what I do best or what I like doing the most is kumain. So vinidyo ko siya. It's the best excuse for me to go out of the house. But kailangan may kapalit yun. Kailangan ko i-edit, kailangan ko i-video, kailangan gawa ng kwento. So I was forced to learn how to use the computer. At dyan ako pinakamahina. Tinulungan ako ni Rames, tinulungan ako ni Diego. Diba, para mga director yung mga yan eh. And so far, my YouTube channel, Nax, is medyo picking up. Medyo growing siya. I've learned to adapt. Swerte ako na at least nalaman ko na meron pala ako nun na given that situation na wala kang aasahan na iba, parang exam eh, parang okay, ito na lang yung panahon, ito lang yung pwede mong gawin. Nagawan ko ng paraan, bawal lumabas, gumawa ko ng paraan, lalabas ako ng konti, mag-video ako, mag-iingat ako, and then gagalingan ko, dapat matuto ako mag-edit. So meron akong bagong skill set na gustong gusto ko. Para ako nagko-compose ng kanta every time gagawa ako ng video ko. Para pa rin gumagawa ng music. Yo.
This is Myrene. She plays bass for us. And like Mike, she too never really had a music workstation prior to all of this. Now she's got her recording setup all ready to go. She constantly sends us new music ideas from home. But much cooler is that she learned how to ride a bike. Bicycles have been a mainstay of human transport for over 140 years, and it took Myrene 139 years later to figure this out. Making up for lost time, she bikes every day, often multiple times. And because of the disrupted transport networks, have kept her moving safely throughout this pandemic. It has given her a source of exercise and much needed freedom to travel. Our rhythm section loves to eat. While Mike reviews food, Maps makes them. I constantly follow her culinary adventures at home, and more often than not, she makes food with a decidedly Korean edge.
We were coming out of the eruption of Taal in January of 2020, so things were a little wonky already. But we still had gigs and stuff. But when we finally got into quarantine in March, it was very hard, to tell you the truth. I didn't want to play anything. I couldn't listen to anything. I couldn't even read. So that's how it started out. I finally had time to really learn GarageBand, which is what is on my desktop. Started working with that, just playing around, finally learning it really, trying to make demos every day, or just trying to learn basics like playing in drums, drum tracks, and then plugging stuff in. Every day I just sit down and try to learn a little something. Around October of 2020, I got bored of walking around outside. I know I needed to go out and get some, physical activity down, so I decided to finally seriously learn how to ride a bike. So that's what I did for about a month. I'd walk the bike down to the flat part of the village and then just go back and forth. Finally learn how to turn, and then until these days I'm just riding around mga 7 to 10k every afternoon around the village.
This is Mom. He plays guitar for us. He's also the guy that knows our equipment and, more importantly, how they work even better than we do. He was instrumental in figuring out how we'll be able to play live without being in the same room together. But his biggest transformation was embracing the world of cycling. And when I say he embraced it, I mean it. Mom was always an avid sportsman. He was a skateboarder, and he and I played basketball at least once a week ever since I've known him. I, however, didn't know him to ride bikes. Right around the start of the pandemic, he bought his first one. In the beginning, just pedaling around his village, but slowly going farther and farther and upgrading his bikes in the process. I don't think Mong took a day off riding since that first time he was in the saddle. Nowadays, he averages 70 kilometers a day and easily rides 200k. We all joke that he's now a professional cyclist. You know what? Because he is. He also helps his wife Mel in scoring music and doing sound design for the many podcasts she produces.
What have we been up to the past 2 years? Obviously, we couldn't play shows. Personally, I can't go on without making music. It's really part of who I am. I guess it's a spiritual, creative, whatever thing. For my mental health, I guess. I constantly looked for opportunities to make music for other people. I've been doing podcasts, sound designing. In fact, I have 2 horror shows out right now on Spotify. Come Home and Nandito Sila. Those have been really fun to do. And I've been doing a lot of commercials you've seen on the internet. Those 5-second thingies before. The stuff you skip. In the course of finding things to do for my physical health, I accidentally stumbled upon cycling. Nagbike ako for the sake of biking only and went to visit Mike D. And I got hooked to going places, feeling relatively safe, being outdoors. This year, 2021, I've literally just done that every morning. Right now, I automatically wake up at 5, minsan 4:30, depending on the length of ride we planned the day before. Ang daming on-the-fly adjustments pa rin. And everyone was just trying to learn to live with the virus. And basically, I started learning to love all forms of it.
This is our singer Rames. I always thought that he would be the hardest one hit when the shows were called off during the start of the pandemic. Rames is a music lifer. Music is in his blood. He doesn't only play with us with Sandwich, but with a myriad of other artists too many to mention. But it doesn't end there. He produces, he makes beats, remixes, and does session work as well. Like I said, a lifer. But he used his free time to set up his excellent YouTube channel called Offstage Hang, where he gets to interview musical artists, going in depth with his guests, with questions and perspectives only he can have, even giving fans and fellow musicians alike an idea of how we were coping with the pandemic. He has also grown exponentially in his skill in shooting, editing, and camera work, as evident with his other project, All Ride, his biking adventure videos on YouTube. Oh, and he's also made an All Ride clothing line, which caters to cyclists and sports enthusiasts alike. So, my fears about him turned out to be unfounded after all.
My friend Darren Lim, who runs D&D Custom Guitars, have always talked about doing a podcast, but we never got around to making it. Finally, when the pandemic happened, we have a lot of time in our hands. We finally did it and created our own podcast. We call it Offstage Hang. We talk to a lot of friends, artists, and interesting people to tell us their incredible stories. I also learned to edit and took a lot of videos about music, random things, and a lot of biking. The All Right videos and merch has kept us busy and financially afloat, especially during the lockdowns.
I, on the other hand, have a slightly different story. My wife Nikki and I found out we were expecting our first child right around the time the lockdown was implemented. I won't lie, it was tough. Not having family and friends to help navigate the birthing process can be hard, especially during a pandemic. But maybe, just like all of us, we used the time we were afforded to make a negative into a positive. We both had a crash course in parenting and thankfully seem to have come out the better for it. We haven't missed any of Elvis's milestones yet, and I've spent more time with him than if we were both working. I actually get to practice with him by my side, whether DJing or playing guitar. Thankfully, he seems to really love the music we play and make at home. To keep my sanity, I also started a podcast called Foaming at the Mouth, which I get to tell stories about growing up in the local music scene, the shows and people I met throughout the years, and more importantly, I get to play the songs that mattered to me. When the pandemic began, just like everybody else, we were afraid, we were nervous. We didn't have that much information in the beginning. We didn't know what it was. Nobody had ever experienced a lockdown before. And I guess what makes it even more harrowing for me and my family in particular is that my wife and I were expecting our first child. Eventually though, our baby came out healthy. Obviously sa beginning, hindi ko alam gagawin ko. But then you get this connection with your child, and maybe the connection that I would have never really had if I was playing shows all the time. That's one of the other bonuses of this pandemic. 1, 2. Another thing that I was able to do during the lockdown and during this pandemic is that I got to revisit a podcast that I was doing. Hey kids, welcome to another episode of Foaming at the Mouth. This week it's going to be a special episode. I know I say that all the time, but this week it really is special because it's going to be our year-ender best of 2021. I had a lot of stories about shows that I've been to, how it feels like to be in the band. We've been around for 23 years, so I tell stories about my bandmates. And at first, I was just doing it for my own sanity, something that made me happy. I would tell little snippets of whatever it was, tell stories about Myrene, Raymund, Mike, Mong, how we began. And then little by little, I would receive messages, emails from people who listen to the show and how much not only did it entertain them, but I think better, it made their days better because there's a lot of anxiety even to this day. And I love the idea that even for an hour and a half, I can somehow make people happy. Another cliche that you hear all the time is patience is a virtue. But guess what? Here we are about to play our first show in almost 2 years. It actually feels like riding a bike. It starts off a bit wobbly, but once we get the cadence in, we're off. My favorite aspect of being in Sandwich is playing live. It's a communion, a celebration. It makes you not only discover your humanity, but your connection to it. Music since the dawn of time has been integral in our world's culture as a way to celebrate both the good and the bad. Whenever people come together for any reason, music is always present. It's one of the most primal and fundamental aspects of human culture. Poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow once observed that music is the universal language of mankind. Here we are with our own celebration, something we couldn't have fathomed happening at the start of this year. But look at us now. George Harrison said, "Daylight is good at arriving at the right time. It's not always going to be this gray. All things must pass." We'll see you at the gigs, guys.
Hindi namin alam kung saan niya nakuha yung broom broom eh. Favorite niya yung cars eh.